Hello, I'm Andy Dailey, the Director of Uptown International School, and with me is Nesma Hassan, the IB PYP Coordinator Designate of Uptown International School as well. It looks a bit dark in here, but trust me, all lights are on. We have a very bright window beside us, casting a shadow somehow on this. Today's topic is going to be about comparing and contrasting the three major programs of education here in Egypt. That would be an American curriculum program, the British National Curriculum Program, and the International Baccalaureate programs. So in addition, we will answer questions about anything regarding the school or IB in general. So you are most welcome to send your questions at any time and so forth. You may have questions generated from this conversation. So right now, I don't see that there are any questions have been asked through any of our social media links. So we're just going to jump in. The first thing I'm going to say is that students can be successful in any program. We have wonderful scholars from the Egyptian National Curriculum who've gone on to make huge successes in the world and of course lead our government. We have others, of course, can be successful in the British system or the American system, and certainly the IB system is what we believe in. But you can be successful in these programs. So that's the first thing. I'll let Nesma translate, and I'll try to be better today about giving myself some breath and giving her time to translate and catch up.
Okay. هو النهارده هنتكلم على الفرق ما بين الأنظمة التعليمية المختلفة اللي هم النظام الأمريكي، النظام البريطاني، ونظام البكالوريا الدولية. وبداية مستر أندي كان حابب يقول إن أي بني آدم يقدر يكون ناجح، وفي أمثلة كتير عن ناس أو أشخاص ناجحين من أنظمة تعليمية مختلفة. فالنجاح مش هو المقياس، أو نجاح الأشخاص خريجي الأنظمة التعليمية مش هو المقياس.
Okay, so we are going to start off with the American system. I graduated from secondary school in 1989, and my whole life was spent in the American education system. Somehow despite my experiences in education as a student, I have been somehow successful in my life. The American system, when I was growing up, was very similar to any national system, including what some of you may have experienced in your life, and sometimes your students, for better or for worse. And that was rote memorization, sitting in a classroom of seats in rows with a teacher lecturing at the front of the room. That was from 1975 until 1989.
هنبدأ بالنظام الأمريكي، ومستر أندي بيقول إن هو خريج النظام الأمريكي سنة 1989. وفي الوقت ده النظام الأمريكي كان مماثل لكل الأنظمة المحلية لمعظم الدول. كان بيتمثل في حفظ المنهج. الولاد بيبقوا قاعدين في صفوف والمدرس بيقوم بشرح المنهج.
The American system today is based on something called Common Core standards. Essentially, there is no such thing really as an American education system. What we have are state systems, and they're all very similar. And about 10 years ago, the various departments of every state of the United States got together and decided they need to have some consistency in how they were teaching and what they expected students to know in English, math, and sciences.
النظام الأمريكي قائم على معايير، وكان في معايير مختلفة للولايات المختلفة، والولايات دول اتجمعوا وعملوا معايير عامة ليهم اللي هي الكومن كور، معايير الكومن كور. ودي معايير بتطبق في معظم الولايات أو كل الولايات.
The Common Core are a series of things that you can, first of all, you can look this up online. It's free. Just type in Common Core standards and you will see them. And it'll tell you what the expectations are, for example, in English language teaching, which would include literature for grade 1, for grade 2, grade 3. And the idea is that we're trying in grade 1 to have every student to meet the standards. So by the end of grade 1, you should have completed or have knowledge of and ability to do the standards listed for grade 1 in every subject they list?
معايير الكونكور موجودة على الإنترنت، وهي بتوفر لنا توقعات لإيه المستوى المفروض الولاد توصلوا في آخر كل مرحلة دراسية. في مثلا معايير الكونكور للغة الإنجليزية، ودي بتكون معايير لكل مرحلة دراسية، وبيكون في توافق ما بين اللي بيتعلموا الولاد وما بين التوقعات الدراسية للمرحلة العمرية.
You can teach the standards any way you want to, but most schools, especially here in Egypt, are very textbook reliant. So various publishers, Macmillan is one I keep hearing about in Egypt, but you also have Hardcore Brace, you have 700 different publishers. And they publish a book that'll be called, grade 1 English or, grade 3 math. And these are set to the Common Core. The issue with these books is that every state has the Common Core, but some states have additional requirements.
تدريس المعايير دي بيتم بطرق مختلفة جدا. معظم المدارس بتعتمد على الكتب الدراسية، ففي مجموعات ناشرين كبيرة جدا بتنشر كتب دراسية كتير. المدارس بتبتدي تاخد الكتب دي، مثلا كتاب لتدريس اللغة الإنجليزية للمرحلة الأولى الابتدائية، وبتكون الكتب دي مبنية على المعايير. بس المعايير دي زي ما هي موحدة للولايات، في ولايات بيبقى ليها متطلبات أكتر من المعايير.
So a textbook company like Macmillan, for example, wants to sell as many books as possible. So they will set the contents and standards of the textbook to meet the needs of the largest US states, like Texas, California, New York, Illinois, where you have big cities, so they can sell more books.
في كتب زي مثلا ماكميلان، هو مشهور جدا في مصر، بيبقوا حابين ان هم يبيعوا نسخ اكتر من الكتاب، فبيحبوا ان هم يغطوا عدد اكبر من المعايير وبيزودوا عليها متطلبات اكتر من ولايات مختلفة.
So, for example, they may have 2 or 3 sections there that satisfy some need in Texas, or 3 or 4 sections more that satisfies the needs of New York, or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 8 sections dealing with something required in Florida. That means the textbook is not really meeting the Common Core standards that the school needs to meet. It's going way beyond that. So if you are teaching the textbook, which many schools here require and parents demand, then you're really going far beyond the requirements, and you cannot do the Common Core standards successfully because you're too rushed.
ففي كتب بيبقى فيها جزء أو أكتر لتغطية متطلبات المعايير أو المتطلبات بتاعت ولاية تكساس أو نيويورك أو هكذا. فده مش معناه إن الكتاب بيحقق المعايير الكومن كور بس، ولكن أكتر من ده، وده ما بيخليش المعايير دي تتحقق بالشكل المطلوب، لأن في حاجات أكتر المفروض تتغطى، فده بيضيق الوقت.
The other problem is, as all of you who have either been in an American school or have kids in American school, is the textbooks are very large. And this is the reason why. They're very heavy because they have lots of extra stuff that you don't need in there. The other part of that is, of course, that they're only teaching the kids in the middle range of learning, the typical student. Kids who need extra assistance or who are a little bit behind because of whatever reason, or kids who need extra stimulation because they're ahead, their needs are not met by the textbooks.
فأي حد كان في مدارس أمريكية أو أولاده في مدارس أمريكية عارف قد إيه الكتب بتبقى كبيرة وتقيلة، لأن المحتوى بتاعها أكبر بكتير من المطلوب، وكمان الكتب دي بتدرس للمستوى الطالب المتوسط، مفيش فيها أي نوع من أنواع التحدي للطالب اللي مستواه أعلى من المتوسط، مفيش فيها أي نوع من أنواع المساعدة أو نوع من أنواع الزيادة الطالب الأقل من المتوسط بيحتاج.
All caught up? Good job. Okay. So what we also have to think about with American systems is there are no standardized examinations. So kids who go up to grade 12 might have never taken an examination to compare them to other students, because this is done by state. It's not done by a national exam like we would find in England or in Egypt.
برضو في النظام الأمريكي مفيش امتحانات موحدة زي الطلبة في مثلا في المستوى ال 12 أو في جريد 12 بيبقى عندهم الامتحانات دي، فممكن يكونوا عدوا بكل المراحل وما كانش عندهم نوعية الامتحانات.
So as a result, a lot of schools take something called MAP tests just so they have some idea if they're meeting the needs compared to other schools. That's very expensive. A lot of schools do that here in Egypt, and strangely do not share results with parents usually. But it's an external thing, so it's not embedded in the curriculum, and it's completely unnecessary.
في امتحان اسمه ماب في مدارس كتير بتقدمه ده عشان يتم معرفة إذا كان تم تحقيق المعايير دي أو الوصول للمستوى المطلوب ومقارنته بمدارس تانية، بس الامتحانات دي هي ملهاش أهمية كبيرة.
So this is why you'll have SAT, Scholastic Aptitude Test, that many students here will take in order to be eligible for university. Universities have no idea if some American school here in Cairo or Alexandria or any place on the planet, including the United States, they don't know if the grades reflect the same thing. Some schools, we all know, are easier and some are harder. So they really don't know university if an A is an A in every school. So they have to rely on the SAT.
في امتحان تاني اسمه SAT وده لتأهيل الولاد لدخول الجامعة، بس الدرجات لأن الدرجات في المدارس بتختلف، في مدارس بيبقى النظام فيها أصعب من مدارس، فالدرجات ما بينفعش الاعتماد عليها، ولذلك الولاد بتاخد امتحان ال SAT.
So, and of course, teaching an SAT is impossible. And the format of the SAT is something most kids have never encountered before because the SAT is its own thing. So it's a bit artificial. You enter a room somewhere and you take an exam, you don't know anything about it. So if you are, you have to sort of practice an SAT. So a lot of companies here in Egypt make tons of money on just SAT preparation. And that's a sad reality that we live in.
تدريس ال SAT صعب جدا أو مستحيل، وطريقة الامتحان بتبقى مختلفة تماما، فالولاد بتخش الامتحان مش عارفين بالظبط الامتحان بيبقى شكله عامل ازاي، ولذلك الطريقة الوحيدة هي ممارسة الامتحان، وده شركات كتير بتعمل منه فلوس كتير لأن هي بتأهل الطالب لأن هو يمارس الامتحان أو ياخد امتحانات مماثلة قبل ما يدخل امتحان ال SAT.
One of the greatest strengths of the American system is the system of electives, non-required subjects, because it allows kids to explore and learn and to have a bigger idea, maybe a more appropriate idea of future careers and things they would like to study at university.
في النظام الأمريكي مواد هي مواد غير أساسية، بس المواد دي بتأهل الطالب إن هو يعرف بالضبط إيه اهتماماته وبتسهل عملية اختياره للجامعة.
So, for example, you'll have a lot of classes in psychology, possibly, economics, business and management, possibly, forensic science, like the study of human anatomy and things of that nature, accounting. I can't imagine a more boring subject than that, sorry, but you might have accounting. You could have all kinds of different unusual sciences and so forth, but there's a lot of flexibility in the American system to have different courses.
على سبيل المثال في مواد زي مادة الاقتصاد، علم التشريح، محاسبة، في علوم مختلفة ومتنوعة، دي كلها أمثلة على المواد electives أو الغير أساسية.
And many universities really like electives because it shows the personality and interest of the students. And so I sort of like that system from the American curriculum.
في جامعات كتير بتكون مهتمة بالمواد دي لأن هي بتعبر عن شخصية الطالب وعن اهتماماته، وده جزء كويس جدا في النظام الأمريكي.
In order to be eligible for university in the United States, normally universities are looking for all the grades of a student in all subjects from grade 9 to grade 12. This is very different from the IB and very different from the British system. So they will ask for, from the school that you're in now, for the subjects and grades from both semesters in grade 9, 11, 10, 11, and 12.
لدخول الجامعة في أمريكا بيتم مطالبة الطالب إن هو يقدم كل درجات المواد اللي أخذها من أول سنة 9 أو grade 9 لحد 12.
So between grade 9 and grade 12, you will be expected by universities to have mastered 4 years of English language and literature, 4 years of mathematics of various types, including Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, and pre-calculus. If you can go beyond that and do calculus, they'll love you even more. A minimum of 3 years of sciences of all types, and usually that's biology, chemistry, and physics. Then 2 to 3 years, depending on the state and depending on the university, you should have at least 3 social sciences. They're also looking at the types of electives that you have taken.
بيتم مطالبة الطالب يكون اللي هو حصل على 3 سنين من اللغة الإنجليزية، أو إن هو تعلم اللغة الإنجليزية لمدة 3 سنين في المدرسة، 3 سنين من علوم الرياضيات المختلفة، و3 سنين من العلوم، ومن 2 ل3 سنين علوم اجتماعية.
Some schools will offer something called Advanced Placement Exams, AP. These are worth college credit, and this is only for grade 12. I guess you can take it in earlier grades, but it's uncommon. And so let's say you take geography, and you can take an advanced placement exam in that. And if you apply to a university that requires social sciences of a certain type, and one of those is geography, then if your score is high enough on the AP, then you don't have to take the geography course at the university. They just give you credit towards your bachelor's degree.
في امتحان تاني اسمه AP، وده بيماثل لعدد ساعات معينة من الدراسة الجامعية، ولو الدرجة عالية جدا في الامتحان ده ساعات بيخلي الطالب ما ياخدش أي نوع من أنواع الجغرافيا مثلا في الجامعة.
So if you have questions of the American system, I'm very happy to try to answer that based on my own experiences, both learning in and teaching in the American system. But to summarize very quickly, it's a pre-K through grade 12 system. It can be and is quite reliant in Egypt on textbooks, where teachers just teach textbooks. And that's not really the intention of how that should work, but that's how it works here. And of course, it's all based on Common Core standards. And external exams are done, such as the SAT, at the end of your 12 years of study. And it can be quite difficult to compare one American school to another because of that differences. So therefore, accreditation is which I didn't talk about earlier, but accreditation is a very big issue in American schools. So I'll let Nesma translate, and then I'll talk briefly about accreditation.
ده للتلخيص ان النظام الامريكي بيبقى فيه الدراسه من مرحله ما قبل رياض الاطفال لمرحله 12 او grade 12. بيعتمد على الكتب الدراسيه، بيعتمد على معايير اللي هي الكومن كور، بيعتمد على امتحانات خارجيه.
Okay, accreditation is an external body, usually nonprofit, and Cognia is very popular here in Egypt, but even better ones are Western associations of schools and colleges and the Council of International Schools. These two bodies and Cognia have accreditation services where they tell you, you need to make sure your science labs have this, that your curriculum looks like that. And so when you have an official accreditation, universities recognize those diplomas as valuable because your school is meeting a certain standard that's been confirmed by a body, an accreditation body. So if you're looking for an American school, make sure that it is accredited. And if you can find one accredited by Western Association of Schools and Colleges and or the Council of International Schools, you're in great shape.
دلوقتي هنتكلم على الاعتماد. في مؤسسات خارجية وغالبا بتكون غير ربحية بتعتمد على أو بتقوم باعتماد المدارس الأمريكية، وبتوفر متطلبات معينة للمدرسة علشان تعرف أو تقدر إن هي تحقق الاعتماد ده. والاعتماد ده بيخلي الجامعات توافق على الشهادات اللي الطلاب بيقدموها من المدارس، وبالتالي الطالب يقدر إن هو يدخل الجامعة.
Let me check. We don't have any questions that I can see.
We received a question.
We received a question.
That's related to British.
That's fun, fantastic. Well, ask me the question.
Okay, so I'd like to know the difference between the British national curriculum and the British international.
Oh, that's a very good question. We are getting to that in a second. I'm checking our Facebook page, and I do not see any questions there just yet, but it could be their internet connection. Okay, so if you have any questions about American or British or IB systems, go ahead and ask that. I'll move on right now to the British National Curriculum. The British National Curriculum does not have the problem that American curriculum has, because American curriculum really doesn't exist. There are 50 states, and each one has a different emphasis. But in Britain, so you have England and Wales operate a system, and Scotland offers its own system, which is somehow similar. But for the most part, schools here in Egypt that call themselves British follow somehow English national curriculum or British national curriculum.
دلوقتي هنتكلم على النظام البريطاني، وده النظام البريطاني المحلي اللي موجود في بريطانيا، وهو مختلف عن النظام الأمريكي، لأن النظام الأمريكي بيقول زي ما قلنا في ولايات مختلفة، ولايات الجامعات كونت الكومن كور، معايير الكومن كور. أما في النظام البريطاني ففي أنظمة مختلفة في إنجلترا، في ويلز، في اسكتلندا، ومعظم المدارس في مصر أو حتى لما بتطبق النظام البريطاني المحلي بيعتمدوا على النظام في إنجلترا أو النظام الإنجليزي.
British national curriculum is provided by the government, and it is divided into something called key stages. So every 2 or 3 grade levels has a set of standards to meet within those 2 or 3 grade levels. So I taught in the British national curriculum myself, and I taught quite a bit in Key Stage 3. Key Stage 3 is what we would call in the United States, or in Egypt for the most part, grades 6, 7, and 8. It will be called years 7, 8, and 9 in the British system. So grade 6, 7, 8 is a key stage. So within those 3 school years, you need to find a way to meet the standard. So it's a bit more flexible in how it approaches the standards.
النظام البريطاني بيكون نظام من الحكومة البريطانية، مكون من مراحل. كل تقريبا صفين دراسيين بيكونوا مرحلة. مستر إندي درس المرحلة الثالثة اللي هي معروفة في النظام الأمريكي أو في مصر بالصف السادس والسابع والثامن، وفي النظام البريطاني معروفين بالسابع والثامن والتاسع. وفي المرحلة دي بيكون ليها معايير معينة وبيتم الوصول ليها من خلال الصفوف الدراسية.
So the British national curriculum is one thing, but then you have companies that sell the actual taught curriculum. So they'll set the standard. Kids should be able to conduct a science experiment on their own using this, that, and the other by the end of what the equivalent of grade 6. Or sorry, grade 5. So, but the school usually is associated with what they would call an exams board. One of those is Cambridge Primary, and one of those is Edexcel. There are others. And so they sell the curriculum to the school, which might include all the books, all the materials, etc., like a plan. So you'd follow that. If the school doesn't do that, then it's easy for schools and teachers to meet the standards in any way they want to.
فالنظام البريطاني زي ما اتكلمنا عنه هو المعايير للمراحل الدراسية، أما في شركات تانية بتبيع المحتوى الدراسي، إيه بالظبط اللي الولاد هيتعلموه في المراحل دي. المدارس البريطانية بتكون متعاونة مع أنظمة امتحانات زي كامبريدج أو أدكسل، ودول بالظبط هم اللي بيوفروا المحتوى الدراسي.
We have a question which is relevant at this point. It's Mohammed Abdul Ghani. You've asked, could some education program be good for a child with certain abilities and not good for the other children? Yes, 100%. Towards the end of our session today, I'll address that clearly once you've heard the British and IB options. Because yes, for example, there are no electives in the British system, period. So if you don't like something that's being taught, or you'd like to explore something else, then that's unlikely to happen. If your school doesn't, there's just no time in the timetable to add another subject. So if you want to study something else like Latin or Greek or Arabic, the school can fit that in, but if it's not fitted into the curriculum, there's just no space. Whereas an American curriculum is much more flexible and can absorb other types of subjects. But you're talking about abilities like English language literature or study of sciences. The British seem to be a bit stronger somehow in sciences, but that might just be a bias. But the IB is very strong in sciences, which is one thing we'll talk about in a few minutes. So let's go back to the British system. Okay. So we've got the situation covered where you usually associate with an exam board. Again, as I just told Mohammed, there are no electives. So there's just no room in the system for that and so forth. So the British system is not just GCSE or IGCSE, which I hear constantly here in Egypt. Oh, we're learning the GCSE, IGCSE. No, that's not really true. The GCSE, IGCSE, they're two versions of the same thing. One is mostly meant for British citizens, and the other one is meant for international students. Both are very strong and both are excellent. That's a fact. So those are what we would call grade 10 exams or year 11 in the British system. So before that, your school may or may not have any type of assessment that is compares your school to other schools. Some schools have that, but most do not. But the propaganda is that they're teaching the GCSE, IGCSE. Let's hope that's not all they're teaching, because if they're just doing that, they're not following the British system. The British system is not just GCSE, IGCSE. Those are exams at the end of grade 10 or year 11, depending on your terminology. Sorry for that.
في النظام البريطاني مفيش مواد غير أساسية، المواد كلها بتعتمد على المواد الأساسية. معروف عن طريق الخطأ إن النظام البريطاني هو ال IGCSE أو ال GCSE. هو ده مجرد امتحان بيتم في آخر السنة العاشرة أو السنة ال11 على حسب الطريقة اللي بتقال بيها السنين في البلد. فده نوع من أنواع الامتحان، وهما الامتحانين دول مماثلين، بس نوع منهم بيكون للطلبة البريطانيين والنوع الثاني للطلبة الأجانب أو الغير بريطانيين. بس ما فيش في أي مراحل تانية بيكون في امتحانات لمقارنة المدرسة بمدارس أخرى. هو ده الامتحان المعروف.
That was quick. So starting in what we would call grade 9 and then continuing to grade 10, students study specific subjects, math and science of different types, and then they take the GCSEs. It's common practice here in Egypt to take the GCSEs as a terminal exam at the end of grade 12. I've always found that a bit disturbing because it's not a university qualification by itself. So you may take, at least for British universities, so if you end up doing nothing but studying for the GCSE and then taking that exam over and over and over to into grade 12, you are still not qualified for British universities as a whole.
المفروض ان من الصف التاسع بيكون الولاد بيتعلموا طبعا الرياضه والعلوم وبيبتدوا ياخدوا امتحان الجي سي اس اي في الصف ال 12 بس الجي سي اس اي ليس مؤهل للجامعه فان هم ياخدوا الامتحان ده كل شويه مش هو اللي هيأهلهم لدخول الجامعه في بريطانيا.
So normally in a British school, at the end of what we would call grade 10 or year 11, students take this GCSE and or IGCSE exams, and then they have 2 years of study for A levels in 3 or 4 subjects. So for example, if you have this desire to be a doctor, then you would study biology and chemistry and something else, probably English, 3 subjects, possibly 4, in order to have a good qualification to enroll in a British university in Britain.
المفروض ان في الصف ال 11 الولاد بيبتدوا ان هم ياخدوا امتحان ال GCSE، وبعدين بعد كده في السنة ال 12 وال 13 بيبتدوا ان هم ياخدوا مواد المستوى الاول او ال A-level، ودي زي دراسة للمواد المتخصصة اللي هتأهلهم للجامعة اللي هم عاوزينها، فبيبتدوا ان هم يدرسوا 3 أو 4 مواد، ودول اللي بيكونوا المواد المتخصصة بتأهلهم للجامعة في بريطانيا.
So to repeat myself again, you have these GCSE, IGC exams, and then you have 2 more years of study. It's because the GCSEs, there are textbooks for that, and they're designed to ensure student success. Most schools here in Egypt just memorize the textbook and memorize strategies for taking exams. There's not a lot of creativity going on there.
في كتب معمولة تحديدا لامتحان ال GCSE، والأساس في ده بيكون إن المدارس بتخلي الطالب يحفظ الكتاب ويعرف استراتيجيات لحل الأسئلة اللي بتكون جاية في الامتحان، فمفيش أي مهارات أكتر من كده بتكون موجودة في الموضوع.
For the A levels, when you take 3 or 4 classes after the GCSE results, if your school is doing that, then you can take them at the school and have proper teachers and training, or you can go to a tutoring center somewhere here in Egypt and be tutored somehow to take the A levels. So you don't even need to be enrolled in the school.
وزي ما مستندي ذكر قبل كده، هو بعد الامتحان ده بيكون في المستوى الأعلى من المواد ال A-level، وده اللي بيأهل الولاد للجامعات، وده ممكن يتم تدريسه في أماكن تدريس المواد البريطانية، مش لازم يتم في مدرسة.
So there's nothing wrong with British education. You just need to make sure that you're in the school that's applying it correctly. Students who are in school should be in science labs, conducting experiments. They should have a whole range of after-school activities to develop their character and personality. They need to make sure that they're taking the GCSE or IGCSE at the appropriate time and not just doing it for years and years and years and years, which still does not qualify them for the university outside of Egypt.
كملخص، مفيش أي مشاكل مع النظام البريطاني، هي المشكلة كلها تكمن في طريقة تدريسه. المفروض في النظام البريطاني يكون في معامل علوم، والولاد بتقوم بعمل بالاستكشاف يعني في معامل العلوم، ويكون في أنشطة كتير ما بعد المدرسة، وإنهم يقوموا بامتحان ال GCSE في التوقيت المظبوط وبالطريقة المظبوطة.
GCSEs are valuable into getting into some universities here in Egypt and other countries in the Middle East.
الامتحان ال IGCSE بيؤهل طلبة لجامعات في مصر وفي الشرق الأوسط.
If you get into a university in Britain or Europe on your GCSEs, you're really not enrolling for your bachelor's degree. You are enrolling in a foundation course, at least a year long, that costs a lot of money and is a real preparation to be successful at university. So you learn the skills you should have learned through your A levels.
أما لو بيتم التقديم في جامعات بره زي في بريطانيا مثلا، بيتم الأول مرور الطالب بكورس تأهيلي يأهله إن هو يدخل الجامعة، فما بيكونش بيقدم على الجامعة على طول، بيكون بيقدم على كورس تأهيلي الأول.
So to go back to Mohammed Abdelghani's question about are certain programs better for certain schools, and the answer is yes. But for the British and American systems, it's really not about American and British systems. It's about the quality of the school itself, because you can teach through memorization, which I strongly do not prefer, in both systems. You can also have a lot of creativity. You also can have a very balanced approach which is the appropriate style through the British and American systems. So you really had to check the school's accreditation, licensing. If it's a British school, is it accredited? The answer hopefully is yes. And then the question is, by who? Is it the British Council, or is it some made-up entity, or is it a real accreditation that's valuable? I worked at the British school here in Egypt before. Very strong school, accredited by everyone who could accredit it. And it ran both IB and British systems, and it was excellent. And there are others in the city as well. If you are looking at the American system, there are very excellent American schools here, but they have strong accreditation and standards. But we also know, all of us, just from living here, that there are a lot of terrible schools that really don't teach skills or really prepare students for university or for life. They're just making money by having people memorize things and pretending that's progress for students, and that's not progress. There's no value in memorizing a history book. My subject's history, and if I memorize the history book, I'm very good at telling stories in the cafe, but I really can't do anything with that. I don't have the analytical skills, the writing skills, the communication skills that come with really studying history correctly. So you may have a preference for British or American. It doesn't matter. What matters is the qualifications and standards of the school.
ونرجع تاني للسؤال اللي كان اتسأل قبل كده، هل في مدارس بتكون أحسن بالنسبة لقدرات معينة للطلبة أو بتختلف على حسب قدرات الطالب؟ فده أكيد الإجابة بتكون بس ده مش بيكون حسب النظام التعليمي بتاع المدرسة، وبيكون بطريقة تطبيق المدرسة للنظام التعليمي ده ومستوى المدرسة. وإذا كانت هي بتوفر نظام تعليمي متوازن، وأكيد اعتماد المدرسة نفسه المنظمة اللي تم اعتماد المدرسة من خلالها، وأكيد إن يكون المدرسة مش أهم حاجة عندها هو إن الطالب يكون حافظ المحتوى بقدر ما إنه هو يكون بيطور في مهاراته، ازاي ان هو يقدر يحلل المحتوى ده، ازاي يقدر ان هو يستعمل مهارات التواصل في ان هو يوصل اللي هو اتعلمه من المحتوى ده، واكيد مهارات تانية كتير.
We have a question from Mohammed Yahya, and it's regarding critical thinking in the U.S. system. So the question was, how important is critical thinking to the U.S. system? Critical thinking should be important in every system because that's actually a real skill. Analysis, drawing conclusions based on evidence and things of that nature. I'm aware that it is embedded in various subjects throughout the American system. And of course, teachers hopefully are going beyond what a textbook might say in terms of critical thinking. So yeah, it's important to the system, and without critical thinking skills, you simply cannot be successful at university. You'll be destroyed very quickly academically. Anas Abdul asked a question, college acceptance-wise for UK enrolled students, which is better for Egyptian students, Cambridge or edXL? They are almost the same, so the answer is they're both equal. Again, it's how are these systems taught in the school, so look at the school and determine its quality. If your kids are just reading books and doing homework, then you should question that approach. There's nothing wrong with appropriate homework at appropriate levels, as long as it's just not memorization. No one wants that. And again, your school pays Cambridge and edXL to be associated with their system. It's a business. So you just need to look at something larger than that, like British Council or Council of International Schools. There's another one called the Independent School Authority or something of that nature. So look at these nonprofit accreditation approaches, and that tells you more about the quality of your school than Cambridge or edXL. I hope that answers your question, Anas. If not, please restate your question. Okay, I think we've covered somehow American and British systems. Now we'll do the the IB system. Definitely not American. All right, International Baccalaureate has 3 distinct programs that we as a school and most schools that are IB schools use. That is the International Baccalaureate Primary Years Program for kids who are 3 years old to grade 5. The IB Middle Years Program for kids from grade 6 to grade 10, and then the IB Diploma for kids in grades 11 and 12. I'll let Nesma translate, and then we'll dig into each program a little bit more.
دلوقتي هنتكلم على نظام البكالوريا الدولية. ونظام البكالوريا الدولية مقسم إلى 3 برامج: برنامج السنوات الابتدائية، برنامج السنوات الإعدادية، والدبلومة أو المرحلة الثانوية.
Before I go further, I have a question from Mohammed Gamal, and it's, what is the difference between Gcse and IB? Listen carefully when I get to the section on IB middle years program, and it is exceptionally different. So somehow similar in terms of subject, but very different in how we do the assessment. So just give me a few minutes and we'll get to that. All right, so the IB PYP, primary years program, and the MYP, the middle years program, are ways of teaching. They are not exam systems. So you have to wipe that out of your mind first. So the IB tells us generally what kids should know by the end of grade 1, end of grade 2, and so forth and so on. But schools can also use international standards from other curricula. So if you are a British school that wants to do PYP, no problem, because the standards for primary especially are very similar to each other if it's British, American, or even IB. So the IB is a way of teaching. It is not a national system. It's not a curriculum. So just get that idea out of your head.
برنامج السنوات الابتدائية والسنوات الإعدادية هم في الأساس طرق للتدريس وليسوا مناهج أو محتوى. فهم مش منهج للامتحان. الأساس في السنوات الابتدائية هو إن في توقعات لكل مرحلة عمرية في البكالوريا الدولية، ومتاح استخدام معايير دولية تانية، لأن في المرحلة دي بتكون المعايير متشابهة بشكل كبير جدا.
So Nesma is the PYP expert. I'm going to go over some of this generally, and she will fill in the depth. And feel free to interrupt me and just run over me. The PYP system is about inquiry and really centered on the student, him or herself. So let's say the standard is a kid should be able to write a paragraph by the end of grade 2. So we don't teach writing a paragraph at the end of grade 2. What we teach is a unit on something like invention. Why do people come up with inventions? What do inventions do? How do they make our lives better? What are examples of invention? And through the discussion of invention, we embed the standards. That's a wonderful response, Miriam. So right now, we're going to work on communicating what we know about inventions by writing a paragraph. And so through this topic or this theme, we do the skills that we're after, okay? So we're not just saying, okay, today we're going to learn how to write a paragraph. No, we're going to learn about how to communicate through a paragraph about what we know on the subject. So we make it a much more natural approach, and it's not subject by subject. Everything in the classroom and everything in all classes relate to invention. Doesn't matter if it's PE or science or social studies or English or Arabic or French or whatever, it doesn't matter. Music and art, it all is about invention. Okay, so therefore the way we teach is transdisciplinary. There's no reading time, that's just reading class, there's no writing class, there's no English class, there's no science, it's just inquiry. And so it's all meshed together. They're a very well thought out and very well planned unit, which we make sure we work together, work with administration like Nesma to make sure what we're teaching is all related around a central theme. Students can identify with something they know. So if they know something about animals or a zoo, then you build your unit around the zoo because they identify with that and can have ownership of that and can contribute to the class. I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry, that was a big mouthful.
Okay, I'll translate and then add a part, or you still have some?
I have more, but go ahead,
okay.
please.
I'd like to add in the end.
Please add in any language you want to.
بالنسبة لبرنامج السنوات الابتدائية هو برنامج قائم على البحث والاستقصاء. بيعتمد اعتماد كلي على الطالب وطريقة الطالب في الحصول على المعلومة. فمثلا لو بنتكلم في المعايير عن معيار الكتابة، والمفروض ان الطالب يكون قادر ان هو يكتب فقرة مكونة من عدد كلمات معين على سبيل المثال. فلو وحدة البحث عن الاختراعات بيتم دمج المعيار ده أو بيتم تحقيق المعيار ده من خلال المفهوم العام للوحدة اللي هو الاختراعات. فمن خلال تعلم الطلبة عن موضوع الاختراعات بيتم طلب من الطالب نفسه إن هو يكتب فقرة عن اللي اتعلمه أنا أو عن اللي بيعرفه عن الاختراعات أو عن الاختراع المفضل بالنسبة له. فبالتالي بيتم تحقيق المعيار وفي نفس الوقت بيكون في نفس السياق بتاع الوحدة. كل المواد بتتناول نفس المفهوم العام. لو الوحدة عن الاختراعات كل المواد بما فيهم الموسيقى والرياضة بيتكلموا عن نفس الموضوع. والوحدة دي بيكون متخطط لها بشكل كويس جدا من قبل ما تبدأ وبيتم دمج المعايير خلال الوحدة.
Did you mention textbooks?
No, I didn't mention anything. I'll add to you when you're done.
All right. So there are no textbooks used in primary school in the PYP program at all because textbooks are not differentiated in terms of ability level or the interest of the students. It's an option to make lazy teachers, frankly, and to just memorize. So we use a vast amount of resources, hands-on learning activities like puzzles or blocks, but also the library and internet resources and so forth. Every classroom has a library of 50 to 200 books for every single unit, and they come from the main library. And we encourage kids to be literate, for them to ask their own questions, conduct their own experiment, and really have ownership of their learning. Kids who enjoy learning learn more, and kids who enjoy learning and being in school don't have behavior problems.
Okay. بالنسبة لاستخدام الكتب ففي نظام السنوات الابتدائية ما بيتمش استخدام أي كتب دراسية لأن زي ما احنا ذكرنا قبل كده الكتب بتكون التدريس فيها لمستوى الطالب المتوسط فما بيكونش في أي تمييز أو مراعاة للفروق الفردية للطلاب سواء من خلال القدرات أو من خلال المهارات أو من خلال حتى حاجات اللي الأطفال نفسهم بيفضلوها. فاحنا بنعتمد على الأنشطة وإن الطالب يستخدم مهاراته في الأنشطة المختلفة، يستخدم مصادر تعلم مختلفة اللي منها المكتب.
So to continue, we've got quite a few questions, but I think we need to get through PYP first. So there's an emphasis in the PYP on skills, not on memorization. Those skills are learning to work together, learning to work by yourself, learning how to ask good questions, understanding where good information comes from and what it looks like, the importance of experimentation and self-confidence.
زي ما ذكرنا بيتم الاعتماد واعتماد كبير جدا على المهارات زي مهارة العمل الجماعي والعمل الفردي، مهارة الوصول للمعلومة أو استخدام مصادر مختلفة، مهارة القيام بتجارب علمية، كل دي مهارات بيتم التركيز عليها في نظام البكالوريوس.
There's a strong emphasis on something we would like to call authentic assessment, really understanding what kids know. In the American system, I would give a multiple choice exam for kids to memorize content or something of that nature. Just tell me what I've taught you. Whereas in a PYP and MYP program, often it's a project. So it could be a research paper. It could be the conducting an analysis of a science experiment. It could be a talk to other students about what you've learned, creating a portfolio, generating a song that communicates what you've understood and the skills that you've done. So it's about applying what you know as opposed to just vomiting up a lot of information.
بيعتمد النظام على اختبارات بتسمى بالاختبارات الأصلية وهي بتعتمد في الأساس على مشاريع على القدرة على التحليل فهي مش بس إن هو بيختار من عدة اختيارات قدامه أو إن هو مجرد إن هو بيسمع اللي هو حفظه ولكن بيقوم باستخدام ما تعلمه في الوحدة في إن هو يبتكر حاجات دي.
Okay, we have some questions I'm going to take right now. So Soraya says, please, if possible, can we have this session saved for further reference to the audience? The answer is yes. You'll find it posted in our social media for you to refer to later. I think you're following the CLIL approach in teaching. I have no idea what that stands for, so please feel free to spell that out. The next part is, we've got a bunch of questions right here, and I apologize for this, but it looks pretty good. Basant asks, so what's the difference? American system and IB system are both about the way you teach, not curriculum oriented, right? That is not correct. The American system has a set of very specific standards that you have to meet to go to the next grade level. We talked about that earlier today. It has textbooks, and it has, so it's traditional teaching essentially. Every subject is taught as an individual subject. It has teaching material, it has standards. Most schools follow textbooks. They have workbooks, they have worksheets. This is a typical traditional approach. They may, and hopefully are mixing in critical thinking, which might be part of the standard depending on the grade level of the subject. But for sure, you can teach it in many ways. So you can be pretty relaxed and teach it through use of the library, but almost no school does that. They treat them as separate subjects, and they have textbooks and things and very structured approach. The IB is a system, so we can use the American standards, but we have to teach it the way we just discussed, which is no textbooks in primary, integration of all subject material around common themes and so forth. So we have to do that as an IB school. We don't have a choice. Where in the American system, you might choose to do that, but you have to meet the standards. We have the standards as goalposts, so every kid is a little bit different. I always give this example, and Nesma's sick of hearing it, that I am relatively intelligent, but by the middle of the first grade, I still could not read. And so the standard would be by the end of the grade one, you have to be able to do this, this, and this. And I was pretty close to not accomplishing those standards. And that's okay in the IB system because every kid has a different growth rate and a different learning rate. And so some things, you'll get in the grade two. That's fine. So the American system says by the end of grade one, the IB system says this is a goal. We hope you make it. And if you do, that's great. If you're a little bit behind, then we continue your individual education plan. I think this is a good place where we can say that in the American system, you get grades, and in the IB system, you cannot get grades. You get narrative reports. Andy is doing a very good job at this, that's the other, and these are what we have observed and what he's shown he can do. Now, the next stage is to develop these things further. We don't say anything about, oh, he's a failure, or he's halfway through the class, or he's smarter than everybody else. We don't compare him to other kids. He's a student and he's an individual, and we discuss what he can do and not what he can't do. And then we discuss our next goals for his growth. So I hope that helps, Basant. If not, please email me back and we'll see. Miriam asks, how can a primary student write a research paper, I suppose, without having any base of information? I have no idea what this question means, but essentially students have to come up with really good questions, and I hope I'm answering your question. So for example, in grade one, if you're talking about invention, the kid might say, what's the world's most important invention? Well, that's a very broad question. So why don't we make it more specific? So it might be, what's the most important invention in my house? And there is no answer to that. There's only the children's opinion. So you can say, I want you to go home and why don't we write down all the inventions in your house? And then we'll discuss each invention and you'll decide which one was the most important to you. And then you can go and you can ask your parents, you can conduct a survey, you can go to the library. The library will have books on inventions and kitchen utensils or whatever it might be. And so then they read that or have it read to them by their parents, depending on their ability level, and then they come up with a conclusion. And then they can make an artwork that demonstrates what they know and understand. They might maybe write something depending on their age and ability level. So research isn't just memorizing something from a book, it's conducting an experiment, conducting a survey. Very valuable skills. If I want to know, for example, what people are wearing and why. Okay, so I would go out with a class, a student, and I would conduct a survey and ask people questions. And so I'd gather data. And once I have data, then I can analyze it. So that is research. So I hope that addresses that, Miriam. If not, please contact me again. What do you think about schools communicating that they teach dual curriculums or say they have, for example, American and IB programs, and as enrolling the kids, we need to choose one? There are many schools here that have 1, 2, or even 3 programs. The IB is very high standard if they're following the IB correctly. So you cannot be an IB school unless you have a 2-year process to become an IB school, and you have certain levels of teacher training and administrative training, in my case. If you don't have that, you cannot be an IB school. So if you're enrolling in a school, make sure they're an official IB candidate school or an official IB school. And it's very possible to run American and IB systems together. I taught at AIS for many years, I think 11 years, and they offered an American curriculum system and an IB for grades 11 and 12. And they did it very, very well at that time. And so it's really about the school and what they're doing by grade level. If you have a specific question, you can contact me and I'll try to answer that. So Miriam asked, how can I evaluate my child that he had accepted an information? Not really sure what you mean by that, but Miriam, you can call our hotline number and speak to someone in Arabic or English, and they will try to answer your question more specifically. I think you're asking about how do we know they mastered their skills, and if that's so, then that's indicated on a report that comes out every 6 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. By the end of each unit, you should know more about what your kid is doing and what they can do and what they need to work on. Okay. Evidence of learning. Every kid has a portfolio. This is what I did in the beginning. This is what I did at the end. So it's a more authentic way of doing something. So giving your kid a number, he gets a 7 or he gets an A or gets whatever that is, doesn't tell you anything about your kid. What it tells you is compared to everybody else, he or she is at a 4. Well, God, what does that mean? It means they're middle of the road. Well, what does that mean? Because a number cannot tell you all the information you need to know. I cannot stand mathematics. I'm terrible at it. I don't know why. I blame my teacher, but not myself, of course. So if I got it, but I got 100% or an A in math, yet I didn't know how to do anything and didn't know what I was doing. But compared to everybody else, I was brilliant. So again, the A doesn't have any meaning. It should be really based on observation and evidence of what Andy Dailey can do. I hope that makes sense to you. Hossam Master, universities prefer IB. That is a 100% yes. In Europe, for certain, because it's an international standard. God, we're going to run out of time, aren't we? Yeah. It's an international standard. In the US, many universities prefer it, but they certainly like it. Canadian universities are just happy with it. It really depends on the university, but for the most part, the only 2 universities I know who do accept it and like it, but still prefer their national system is Oxford and Cambridge. Other than that, all universities in Britain prefer IB students over their own national system. Basan says, thank you for clarification. You are very welcome. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions there, but I better look over here. It's been a good day for questions. Yeah. How are extracurricular activities treated in the IB? Mohammed says they're actually required 100% in the diploma, but also in the MYP. The MYP has something called services action. So you take something you've learned in school, then apply it outside of school in some sort of service learning way. So if you learned all about in biology about recycling, then you might volunteer at a recycling center, or you set up a recycling information program for someone, and so forth. For grades 11 and 12 in the IB diploma, it's a requirement. So your students or child provides the school and something called the CAS coordinator, all the documentation of what they've been doing in terms of extra learning outside of school, in terms of service learning outside of school, and in terms of their activities outside of school that usually are involving sport or health related issues. And that should be done 2 or 3 or even 4 hours a week throughout 18 months. So it's a very heavy thing. If you do not do that, then you cannot graduate with an IB diploma. Our session today is supposed to be over at 3, but I'm going to take an extra 10 or 15 minutes to continue because we haven't talked about MYP or DP. And it's all of your fault because you keep asking great questions. What is the end stage for IB and what are the tests that go to the university? Mohammed, I'll answer that in just a minute. Content language integrated learning. I'm not familiar, Abir, with this lingo, so I really can't answer it. But it's nothing I've heard of in the IB. All right. Nesma, are you okay?
Yes, I'm
Prepare for MYP. So IB PYP ends in grade 5, and there is something called an exhibition. The exhibition is a large project that demonstrates all types of skills and research that the kids have learned throughout PYP. It's a big event, and it's like a final assessment that the kids can be proud of.
Okay. هو هنا بنتكلم على نظام البكالوريا الدولية للمرحلة الإعدادية، وسألني كان بيذكر المهارات وإن هي مستمرة في المرحلة الإعدادية.
That was fast. I'll say in grades 6 through 10 in the IB, it's called middle years program. Starting in PYP but continuing through MYP, students must study a minimum of 2 languages. The IB loves language. So they can also study 3, but it's a bit difficult to schedule that. But we have 2 languages for sure. We have physical education, a class called design where they're solving problems. They must have integrated science up to grade 8, which would be a combination of physics, biology, and chemistry. And then in grades 9 and 10, they would have specific classes in biology, chemistry, and physics. They must have a class on social sciences, social studies called Individuals and Societies, which is a combination of geography, economics, and history. They must have performing arts, which includes drama, music, and other things, dance perhaps, or theater. And then they also have visual arts. I can't think of anything else. But yes, sciences, maths, languages, all types of arts, design, and physical education. I believe that covers all of it. And then, of course, Egyptian government requirements of religion and Arabic social studies. So we have subjects. They don't have choices. They must take all these. That's how it's similar to GCSE. That was a question we asked earlier. The subjects are very similar to GCSE, in fact. They're taught as individual subjects, but they can also be taught integrated like we do in PYP. We don't usually do that. What we do is say, okay, music and physics have a very close relationship. So out of the 5 or 6 units this year, one of them will be about sound waves and physics and the combinations of that. So we do it by subject and sometimes more than one subject. But that's how we do transdisciplinary interdisciplinary teaching.
المرحلة الإعدادية بتكون لسنوات من الصف السادس لحد العاشر. بيقوم الطلاب بدراسة على الأقل لغتين أو 3 بس في الأساس بيكونوا لغتين. بيدرسوا رياضة، بيدرسوا مادة اسمها مادة تصميم، بيدرسوا علوم اللي هي البيولوجيا والكيمياء والفيزياء، بيدرسوا دراسات اجتماعية، تاريخ وجغرافيا، بيدرسوا فنون زي الدراما والرسم، وأكيد في متطلبات الوزارة للعربي وللدين، وبيقوم التدريس في المرحلة دي على تدريس مواد منفردة. ساعات بيكون في دمج ما بين المواد لو المواد فيها أي نقاط متشابهة.
There's something similar in the MYP and PYP is that, and DP, frankly, that we also have the learner profile, 10 attributes that all learners, including teachers, should have. This is where we have values education. I've gotten tons of questions about value education since I started here as the director. So we do have an involved, integrated conversation with students about values. So please be aware that you don't get that in the American system unless it's the school has implemented it. And you don't get that in the British system unless the school specifically is implemented. But for IB, it's integrated automatically and it's a requirement.
في حاجة مشتركة ما بين ال3 أنظمة للبكالوريا الدولية اللي هو النظام الابتدائي والإعدادي والثانوي، هي حاجة اسمها ملامح المتعلم، ومن خلال ملامح المتعلم بيقوم المدرس بتعليم القيم والمعايير. دي حاجة ما بتكونش موجودة في النظام الأمريكي أو البريطاني إلا باختيار المدرسة لو بتدرسوا كبرنامج منفصل. أما في البكالوريا الدولية فدي حاجة من متطلبات البكالوريا الدولية ولازم تكون موجودة في المدرسة.
Another thing that PYP, MYP, and DP, the final stage, have in common is differentiation of instruction. We really do believe in students as individuals. So we work to meet the needs of those students. So if they come into a school like ours, that's working on IB, then a student who might be a little bit lower in English has extra assistance and has skills and activities designed to help them move forward. If they are advanced in math and other students, then they should not be neglected. They should have their needs met, and they should be challenged to work to even higher standard. So we often have 2 or 3 ability levels in every subject in every class. And so we as teachers work extra hard to make sure that we have those addressed in a meaningful way.
عامل مشترك تاني في الأنظمة المختلفة البكالوريا الدولية الابتدائي والإعدادي والثانوي هو التمييز أو مراعاة الفروق الفردية. إحنا بنؤمن إن كل طالب هو شخص منفرد مستقل بذاته، ليه مميزات مختلفة عن الباقيين، فبنقوم بتصميم أنشطة تلائم أو تناسب الاختلافات ما بين الطلاب، سواء من ناحية الاهتمامات أو من ناحية القدرات أو المهارات. بيكون في الفصل تقريبا 3 مستويات، والمفروض إن الأنشطة تناسب ال3 مستويات دي وتؤهلهم إنهم يوصلوا لمستوى معين من الفهم.
So just teaching to the middle is not allowed in the IB system.
فتدريس المستوى المتوسط من الطلاب هي حاجة مش موجودة ومش ملائمة للنظام البكالوري الدولي.
So like at the end of grade 5, at the end of grade 10, there's another summative assessment that covers, again, the skills and knowledge that kids have gained throughout their 5 years of MYP. In this case, it's called a personal project. Requires a lot of research over a long period of time, written work, artistic work, but basically the idea is employing those skills of research, analysis, and then the ability to communicate what you know.
في آخر الصف الخامس والصف العاشر بيكون في مشروع للطلبة علشان يقدروا إن هم يستخدموا المعلومات اللي هم اتعلموها في المرحلة. فمثلا في آخر المرحلة أو في آخر الصف العاشر بيكون في حاجة اسمها مشروع فردي، والمشروع الفردي ده بيكون استخدام مهارات مختلفة لكل طالب في إن هو يقدر يعبر عن اللي اتعلم.
So IB will ask us for examples of our personal projects. They'll tell us, oh, you have 20 students, so we need you to send the following 5 students' work, so that then we can then get feedback. Your personal projects are on the same standard as all students around the world. Your personal projects need more work and you're not following the international standard. Your school is exceeding the national standard, the international standard. So I think this is not really an exam board like you might have in Britain or something, but it's international experts that work with and for the IB that tell us how we're doing. And so that's very important to us.
احنا مطالبين بتقديم امثله للمشاريع الفرديه دي لمنظمه البكالوريا الدوليه، وبتكون منظمه بانهم يدونا تغذيه راجعه عن المشاريع دي وبعد مقارنتها بالمعايير الدوليه، فبيقدروا ان هم يقولوا لنا هل احنا محققين المعايير الدوليه، هل احنا محققين اعلى من المعايير دي، او محتاجين ان احنا نشتغل اكتر على المشاريع دي. ده مش لجنه امتحان، هي اكتر كمتخصصين دوليين بيقدروا ان هم يدونا زي تغذيه رجعيه او طرق لان احنا نحسن من المشاريع دي.
So the next part is IB Diploma. Many of you have been waiting for that, and I appreciate your patience. The IB Diploma is the gold standard of international education. It can be very challenging, especially for kids who did not come through the IB system, because they may not have been using skills or developing skills that are required for success at university. We start that at 3-year-old children. They start to learn analysis and communication skills and all those things, which are then deployed throughout their education. So let's go ahead and translate that, and then I'll get to the meat.
بالنسبة للدبلومة أو المرحلة الثانوية من البكالوريا الدولية، فهي مرحلة ساعات بتمثل تحدي للطلبة الجايين من أنظمة تعليم مختلفة وما تعودوش على استخدام المهارات. لذلك المرحلة دي بتكون صعبة أو فيها تحدي للطلبة دي لأن هي بتتطلب من الطالب استخدام مهارات.
So the IB can be a bit complicated, but you should understand that students, unlike the American system, which may or may not have AP exams at the end and may be full of English, but also math and also electives. The IB, you require 6 subjects. You must study them. You study them over 2 years per subject. So whatever you select, you're in that row for 2 years, 18 months of instruction.
على عكس الدبلومة الأمريكية أو النظام الأمريكي في الدبلومة البكالوريا الدولية أو النظام الثانوي الطلبة المفروض إنهم بيدرسوا 6 مواد على سنتين يعني كل مادة بتستمر لمدة سنتين.
Those subjects, if you're successful in them, then those are equivalent to bachelor degree level subjects in the university.
لو الطالب نجح في المواد دي فدي بتكون على مستوى مؤهل جامعي.
So for example, if you are successful as an IB diploma student, you can get up to 1.5 years of university credit in some states in the United States. So instead of a 4-year bachelor degree, you just finish it in 2.5 years.
في طلبة لما بيتخطوا دبلومة الاي بي بيكون ده او بيكون مماثل لسنة ونص من عدد ساعات الدراسة الجامعية يعني بدل ما بيخلصوا الدراسة في الجامعة بعد 4 سنين بيخلصوها بعد 2 سنين.
To go briefly, because we're way over time today, students must take a minimum of 2 languages, but could also take 3. They'll take a minimum of 1 math. They can take 1 or 2 sciences, depending on their other choices, 1 or 2 social sciences, depending on their choices. And depending on those choices, they have the option of taking some sort of arts course, either performing or visual.
في الدبلومة بيتم أو بيكون الولاد بيدرسوا على الأقل لغتين مادة رياضة واحدة مادة علوم أو مادتين مادة علوم اجتماعية أو مادتين وده على أساس اختياراتهم يقدروا إن هم ياخدوا مادة من الفنون سواء دراما أو رسم.
There are 3 additional things they must complete. They're called the core of the program. One of those is a class called Theory of Knowledge, which is dealing with knowledge and how we know what we know. Another one is a 4,000-word research paper called the Extended Essay, which is a university-level piece of writing. And then they must complete what we talked about earlier, CAS, Creativity, Activity, and Service, which is essentially wrapped around service learning and developing yourself outside the regular school curriculum.
في 3 مواد ثانية هي من الأساسيات. الأولية هي نظرية التعلم والثانية هي الأنشطة الاجتماعية. What was the third one? Theory of Knowledge, CAS, and
Extended Essay, a 4,000-word research paper.
بحث مكون من 4,000 شيء.
So we have a question is what is the end stage for IB? What are the tests and where do they go to university? Another question that was asked was about the exam board. So they're the same question. So at the end of 18 months, students take, so at the end of grade 12, they take over a period of 1 month, a series of examinations per subject. It'll be either 2 or 3 exams depending on the type of course they've taken. Those are examined by official IB examiners around the world. So I used to examine myself several things for IB. So history is my subject. So I would examine 60 to 100, no, actually it was more, about 200. I would read through 200 to 400 essays for the second exam of the history section. And so I would mark those, and then someone takes my 200, selects 20 of them randomly and marks them to see if my examining of those assessments were correct. Then someone above them checks their work too. So we have several layers of people checking each other's work to ensure an international standard. So the exam board is the IB itself.
بعد 18 شهر اللي هم السنتين اللي هم جريد 11 و 12 بيكون في امتحان لمدة شهر. الامتحانات دي بتكون امتحانين أو 3 لكل مادة على حسب المادة نفسها، وبيتم تصحيح الاختبارات دي عن طريق ممتحنين من البكالوريا الدولية، من منظمة البكالوريا الدولية، وبيتم مراجعة التصحيح دي كذا مرة.
So the question was, where do these kids go to university? Different countries and different universities have different application times. In Britain, the application deadline is far earlier than it is in the United States. So you would submit them to British universities who will tell you, yes, you're welcome to join this university if you get an overall IB score of whatever, 35 or 40 or 28, whatever that is. And so if you get that, then you get an offer to go to this British university. In the US, the acceptance is based on something else. Your grades in school, your essays you've submitted, maybe an interview you've done, and then what they admit you earlier than before the IB results get out. But when the IB results come out, you've already selected your university anyway, but then the university decides what is that diploma that you took worth per subject or for the overall diploma. If you want some more clarification on that, just give me a call on the hotline and I'll explain it a bit more clearly. We are way over time today, and I thank you for your patience. Is there anything you'd like to add, Nesma? No? I've worked her to death today, and I'm sorry for that. Lucky you.
PYP is over, so
Yeah.
I can't really answer anything else.
If there's anything you'd like to know about comparison of American, British, and IB systems, or to know anything more about IB generally or the school, you can call our hotline number, which is on all of our social media and our website. And our admissions officer will give you more details or refer you to me or Nesma for further clarification. So again, this is recorded and it will be posted on our social media later today or tomorrow, and you can refer back to it. But thank you for your patience and your great questions today. I really enjoyed that. So that's it. Bye for now. Stay safe and make sure you're wearing your mask. I'm tired of seeing people without masks on. Okay, bye.